And
All
I
right.
and I know the way this works is that for some stupid reason, it wants me to press the start stream button. So now I need to look for that. Because I can't just press start streaming on the frickin' OBS.
I love this one too, which I'll extend.
Let's just say I am very glad that I have all my that I do YouTube stuff on a different browser than I do my regular browsing.
Do you use the Epic Privacy browser?
I use Epic Privacy Browser. The other Epic Privacy Browser, Brave.
Oh, okay.
Tor is designed by the Department of Defense and they run like a big percentage of the nodes, so don't assume that you're safe there. But anyways, I'm pretty sure we're live.
I just got a notification through my phone, so yep.
Let me I have the stream open on my phone too. Let me just is it live? Someone in the chat type something if you can hear us. It's probably on a second delay, so we'll have to wait a bit.
Yep, you're live.
All right, perfect. All right, hello everybody. Thank you for bearing with us in our random banter. And today we're going to be doing something a little different. Instead of doing our usual stuff, we're going to be watching a video. This one we've been getting requests a lot on our Discord servers, so I figured, hey, you know what? Let's just sit down and watch this video by BadMouse about the problem with free speech. And I'm
Well,
actually
it's also because there aren't really that many news stories for right now. I mean, there's the Article 13 thing, but I'll probably make a video on that later.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's much else to say about Article 13 besides what I already mentioned in a video I made a few months back. Might need to do some updates on that, but yeah, nonetheless. Yeah, we're going to be watching this video and we'll be doing live commentaries. Just, oh crap, that was already on live stream. Never mind. So, here's the thing like, none of us here, freaking none of us have actually watched a video yet, so this is going to be our first reactions to it. This should be fun.
RIP your recommended videos.
Alright, it should be fine now. Alright, everybody can see it?
Yep.
Alright, here we go.
One day I was helping out the Free Palestine stall on Church.
Holy crap, who doesn't have their headphones in?
It's probably me.
Alright, yeah, put your headphones on.
Go ahead and play it. I'm just gonna keep it muted while I'm getting my headphones in.
Alright.
Street. About an hour in, a young dude came up to me and gave us the usual conservative drivel. He told me that he just couldn't support the left anymore, because to him, we were all against free speech.
I mean, they are.
And so are conservatives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, demonstrably. Oh shit! What the fuck was that?
I didn't do anything.
Something just was very loud and staticky. But anyway, yeah, demonstrably so. I mean, this is a problem which has been with the ideologies which identify with the left, and yeah, there's support for freedom of speech. This has been particularly, this has been observed by many people, ranging from, of course, conservatives all the way to people like Noam Chomsky has even acknowledged the problem with free speech on the ideological left. So, I mean, to deny that is completely ridiculous. I mean, I could specifically tell you exactly where the root of their disposition for freedom of speech is. It's in the influence of Foucault in the teachings on college campus of ideologies. Uh, for those of you who aren't aware, Foucault is a postmodern philosopher who looked at every single social dynamic in society as a power struggle, which you hear that when you hear things like racism is power plus privilege, prejudice.
Prejudice
Yeah,
plus power equals racism.
yeah. That's a Foucaultian idea right there.
Yeah.
And
Also, we got a super chat from one guy, no plan ever, for $9.99. He says, "I got mo money, motherfucker. Let's make it rain. Go, goy, let's go."
hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, and I'm still working on getting these freaking payments set up. This system is absolute ass. Anyways, yeah,
Eh,
thank you for that. Now let's continue.
Me
Well,
with flyers detailing the extent of Israeli war crimes against Palestinians, and how little the world still hears about their plight. He took one look and stated that he just wasn't interested in our campaign, and bid me farewell. For of course, we must always have our standards.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely.
There's never been a more unshakable dogma in my lifetime than that of freedom of speech. The real test of a country's standards is if it allows people to criticize one another, especially the regime. The foundation of liberty and freedom and fribity is the story of free expression. After all, if you want to know who has the power, just look at the group that you're not allowed to criticize.
I just want to say something real quick. What's going on with these production values? I mean, holy crap. The quality on this is exceptional.
well, to be fair, I mean, it takes like 1 to 2 months to make a new video. So,
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but geez, like, this is really high quality stuff.
Right? No. I'm here today to tell you that freedom of speech is not just some base flatline monolith from which all societies are to be held accountable to. It's a political concept, thought up by human beings, subject to critique, and quite frankly, is in great need of one.
what?
I don't. I think that was just a word salad.
Well, what I think is hilarious is that he's actually contradicting himself. That the concept of freedom of speech needs to be criticized. It's an inherently self-contradictory position. If you're
you're only able to be
yeah,
critical of free speech because of free speech.
if you're critical of the idea, then you're expressing it and therefore demonstrating that you are in support of it. It's a position which can't be defended because it's logically self-contradictory. Now,
I believe the term Stefan Molyneux uses is self-destructing arguments.
yeah, well, as for the idea that freedom of speech is a invented concept, is a political concept, no. It exists as a result of human agency. It's something which we naturally have, and it could only be negated by the use of force.
I was thinking like he's probably going to make an appeal. I haven't seen the video, so I don't know, but I have a feeling he's going to make an appeal to determinism. And well, we'll elaborate on
Yeah,
more when that comes up, I think.
yeah. The from what I've seen of censorship apologists, they tend to either do one of two things. They appeal to determinism in order to try and get around that, or they're going to make the slippery slope fallacy.
We'll see.
Your concept that freedom of speech is good is only possible if your opponent also agrees with you, i.e., they're not going to kill you if you happen to disagree.
I'm sorry, but that is absolutely absurd. Right and wrong is not determined by the consent of the other person I am talking to. If the other person says, if I say 2 plus 2 equals 4, and they say 2 plus 2 equals banana, only one of us can possibly be correct, or none of us, because the two are mutually exclusive. This is how non-contradiction works. So I don't need another person's consent for something else to be true. Now, a person might try to kill me because they might think that my expressing that freedom of speech is good is somehow blasphemy against a religion, and they think they are justified in killing me. That does not make that factually correct.
Well, filthy. If you say that 2 plus 2 equals 5, then obviously that means 2 plus 2 equals 5 and doesn't have an objective answer.
Especially if the majority of people agree with you.
I love how morals and ethics are pretty much entirely based on what other people consent to. I mean, if that's the case, then I mean, that's eventually going to lead to what's it called? Rule. Oh, I keep forgetting on the term. Like might makes right. That's it.
Yeah, the problem with might makes right is that since it doesn't have any foundation, it's not really a right. It's again a self-destructing argument, as you referred to it.
All right, hold on a second. Just writing something in the chat here. Oh, well, let's just play it.
So therefore, if your opponent doesn't and will use aggression against you, you can't really argue for freedom of speech in that circumstance. Materially, I mean.
We just
the
did.
The conditions around you have to be such that no one is going to die. Right, okay, what are we on
Can you pause it again?
So,
Yes.
Yeah, it's really hilarious when materialists will make arguments like this and will then turn around and say that the rationalists are the people who are making an is-ought correlation, because that's exactly what he just did. He's making a correlation between an is and a not. Something is not moral if you don't don't inherently have access to it. So you don't have freedom of speech, or you don't have the ability to say something unless absolutely everybody is going to be at 100% okay and not try and do anything to you for saying it.
I'm not gonna lie. I've heard so many people make the is-ought argument so incorrectly that whenever I hear anyone say it, I just roll my eyes.
Yeah, the rationalists they're the one group of people that don't make an is-ought correlation.
Alright, I'm playing.
oh, okay. Here we go. The Weimar Republic. Full suffrage, large democracy. Massive instability and debt caused from the prior war. Enter the Nazis. And the German
Godwin's
Communist
Law.
Party. Yes, everybody seems to forget, but the commies were there too, headed by one Ernst Thälmann. At their peak, they gained 16% of the vote in 1932. Now, whilst Ernst was forward in his anti-fascism, the Social Democratic Party, and their newspapers, did not seem to understand the idea of a united front. They refused to effectively confront fascism and simultaneously denounced the KDP as being a bunch of Muscovites, sporting the now famous Iron Front symbol. The SPD's failure to effectively confront fascism aided Hitler's rise to power, sent the KDP underground, and Ernst to 11 years in the hole.
I don't know where he's getting this, but the communists in pre-Nazi Germany were incredibly aggressive against the fascists and the Nazis. Like they were.
Yeah, and social democrat publications in Europe and North America were sympathetic to both communists and fascists at the time.
In fact, it was this animosity that Hitler used in order to orchestrate the kind of violence he needed in order to create all the false flags that he did that eventually got him to rise to power. In other words, he puppet mastered the communists into doing what it is that eventually got him into power, and really all he had to do was to uh, put a red flag in front of him and the bull will just charge. They're really not that difficult to control.
Followed by a firing. Don't tell me that free speech exists in a vacuum. It doesn't. In this video, we'll talk about
Who
the
the
necessary
fuck said
further
that?
question.
Yeah, what the fuck? I'm sorry, I've literally never heard that before. Free speech exists in a vacuum. What?
I'm trying to like, I don't know what that means. I'm trying to figure out, like, in what context would someone make the argument that free speech exists, but what they're actually saying is free speech exists in a vacuum, because that doesn't. I mean,
Because usually when someone is referring to something existing within a vacuum, what they're referring to is sort of it tends to be attracted to this thing, and I've never heard an argument for for any sort of right based on the argument that, oh, it's if you remove this, people would be attracted to it.
We need to ask on this topic, who dictates the media? Which views are more profitable? And if the Enlightenment was correct, why did liberalism fail in its mission?
The most precious thing in life, I think, is
The state.
your mouth.
Yeah, pretty much fundamentally, that's the reason the Enlightenment values failed, is because of the state.
pretty
And
much.
I've gone into extensive detail before that liberalism, it's presented in popular media like it was a grassroots opposition movement to feudalism and monarchy, but if you look at John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, these writings were published by guilds in the European countries, which means that they had to be approved by the feudal government, which that John Locke or Thomas Hobbes were living under, which means that the government essentially that they had state-approved views.
I wonder what that could mean.
You know, there probably were.
Third
I'm sorry, but there probably were anarchists long before Pierre Joseph Proudhon. It's just that you never heard anything from them because the only things which could ever be widely published prior to like the late 18th century would have been things that are published by the state. That being said, it really raises some questions about liberalism, especially when you get into the fact that the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and these liberal revolutions all around the Western world at the time were
Funded by
large.
the Rothschilds.
Yeah, they were largely funded by the moneylenders that were previously propping up feudalism and companies like the London Company, for example. So I would argue that liberalism is basically just an attempt to continue the state after the state under mercantilism had proven itself to be unsustainable.
Basically, they were trying to preserve the state by transitioning or by transforming how it functions in its relationship with the people. To create something, it's just an innovation in the way people are oppressed to make it less obvious. But anyways,
Yeah, see, I don't necessarily know if people like Thomas Jefferson would have been in on it. But we know as a matter of fact that Alexander Hamilton and George Washington were in on it. They had explicit ties to the Rothschild cartels. So
yeah, and the more I learn about what's his name, Alexander Hamilton, the more I realize the guy was basically a totalitarianist.
Oh, the guy's funny too.
He's
Wasn't he the one that paid somebody so that he could screw their wife?
I think so. Yeah, I heard about that.
I haven't heard that one, but that's fucking
It was
great.
it was in a series of letters that were published. I think I can find them again later.
Yeah, a lot of these Rothschild stooges end up being complete fucking degenerates in their real life. You got Alexander Hamilton paying people to cuck their wives. You've got Karl Marx raping his maid and then living off of his friends, mooching off of him for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Fucking
Basically,
Didn't he also abandon his kids or something?
yeah,
Yeah.
he did.
he threw the maid. He fired the maid and threw her out into the street when she got pregnant. I can almost imagine it. There is a descendant of Karl Marx out there somewhere, who was
Oh, there
born from that
there
maid.
is actually.
Huh.
Yeah, there is a descendant, and he fuck, I can't remember his name right now, but he lives in London, and he apparently lives outside of a McDonald's. Like he lives on the streets.
That's ironic. That's both ironic and fitting.
He's not actually a socialist though,
I figured as
Because-
much.
because there was an article on him, and that's what he said. Is yeah, my great grandfather was an idiot. Pretty much.
Anyways, I'm gonna play now. I don't think we're gonna get more than halfway through this, so
Precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself.
Is that
This
Mr.
clip
B?
was one of the first main intro points for me,
it might be.
as well as many others, into the realm of super free speech. And it's strange looking back on it just how dated it all is. It's not like we didn't have the arguments back then, but more so, nobody really cared. We were all swept up in the dogma. To challenge free speech would be on the same level as strangling a baby. Anybody can speak about the joys of free speech, but it means absolutely nothing to somebody who has no power with that speech. What, freedom to beg?
Yep, I called
That's
it.
institutionalized sadism. Now, I'm not a believer in some hierarchy of rights, but if I did, this would not go at number 2. This would go at, like, I don't know, some 97.
I'm just pausing here because, well, first off, I don't know very many people who aren't conservatives and are trying to rationalize the cognitive dissonance that they have with the state, who believe in a hierarchy of rights. I mean, rights are derived from self-ownership. There is no hierarchy.
Yeah, even the more liberal types don't believe in a hierarchy of rights. What they believe is that every right exists for the same reason, and a violation of one is a violation of all of them. Which that is the case.
The way I used to see it is that you had life, liberty, and property, the basic classical American idea. That those three in that order are what's going to be most important. So, but that also creates a problem in the sense that if your right to property comes at the expense of someone else's life, well, their life is more important. But that creates a whole host of problems, which
yeah, and that's the reason why fucking positivism doesn't work. If you're legislating a quote unquote right which depends on the subjugation of the individual, then you don't have rights.
Pretty much. Alright, I'm playing now.
Now, why is it that I say this? Well, in the words of some philosophy dude who people say look a lot like me, no rights matter if you're dead. Food, water, healthcare, housing, these are all things we need in order to survive and fulfill and enjoy all those other things that we now consider rights. And despite
He
Yeah,
just listed positive rights, just as you said it. Just as you said positivism.
yeah. Well, and not only do you not have rights if you're entitled to material things, but also you don't have even the ability. The problem with nationalized services is, again, they aren't able to be provided to people. That's when you get rationing. So I mean, you don't have any rights and you don't have any services in the aims of trying to make material things rights. That's the reason why rights can't be fucking uh, positivist.
Well, the problem I see is that these rights, I think you said earlier actually, that the rights are necessarily going to come at the expense of someone else. In that case, if you have a right to food, then someone has to make that food. If you need to
Right.
pay someone to make that food, then that pay is an impediment to your right to food. Therefore, people not being enslaved to produce food is going to be necessarily a violation of your positivist rights. So there is no moral argument that would be able to justify this kind of positivism. And this is probably the issue that uh, Bad Mouse Productions is seeing. He sees rights in a positive aspect, that you have a right to something. You have a right to food, healthcare, whatever. And he sees speech in the same way, that you have a right to free speech. Which
That's
I mean,
the
I can see why he. Sorry, I wasn't finished. I
Okay.
can see why he would make that conclusion, because the way that free speech is explained or is expressed does sound very positive. You have a right to free speech. Whereas the way rights actually work in a negative aspect is you have a right to not have your speech impaired. You were
Right,
just.
and that's fundamentally the issue with these people, is they don't understand that. And I think you said it pretty well. Take the example of food, for example. Well, if we were to, if we were to take positive rights at face value, that would mean somebody is going to be coerced into providing that, and the natural conclusion of that is slavery. Which I don't think Bad Mouse is going to say that slavery is okay. Holy fuck! Can you, like, I don't know who's making that noise, but it's distracting the shit out of me.
It might be. What's it sound like?
It sounds like a transistor.
Is it continuous?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna move my computer away from my mic because the fan is blowing.
that's probably what it is.
All right, so is that
I
better?
don't hear it.
Yeah, it's a bit better. It's a
Okay.
lot quieter now.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna play it now.
Despite the fact that millions of people around the world end up dying from the lack of these needs, even when they're universally agreed upon, you ever notice how the whole discussion goes very, very quiet?
You want to know why that is?
As you can
Well, first of all, they don't go quiet. They tend to, say, "Oh, this is a failure of the free market." That tends to be how it's presented in the media, or the government needs to be involved. But you want to know what all the mainstream discussion is suspiciously quiet about regarding this specific debate? The fact that every single one of these poverty-stricken countries where people don't have access to these basic rights, well, not these rights, but this basic food and the things that they need to survive, have a stable living for themselves, they are the most authoritarian countries that exist.
I mean, you remember when what's his name? Democratic Socialist 01 and two other of the communist YouTubers put out a video at the same time about capitalism's death toll. Their arguments basically come down
Yeah.
to the lack of, or the failure of capitalism to produce post scarcity, the failure of capitalism to reverse entropy, is the result is and the reason and the failure of capitalism to basically make us literally immortal. It means that every person who has ever died ever can be blamed, or their deaths can be blamed on capitalism.
By the way, I'm looking at the Hangout. That's definitely you, Pumpkin. The sound is coming from you.
And has it stopped now?
It's, no, I could still hear it.
1 second.
I think that might just be my fucking headphones, actually.
Huh, maybe.
Did it stop while my mic was muted?
No, it's my fucking headphones. That's why I think it's my headphones.
Oh, okay. I also wanted to mention that he ended that thought with an appeal to popularity again.
And now, well, you can see on screen that he's about to apply. He's about to. That he's about to cite Sargon as an example for some reason. Because, I mean, is Sargon some great defender of free speech, even though he thinks that rights come from the government?
He tries to bill himself as one, but yeah, as you mentioned, he has the same fundamental conception of rights as BadMouseProductions. And now I'm sure the liberalists are going to autistically screech at me over saying that. But no, I mean, seriously, think about it. You both think that rights come from the government. You both think that people need to be coerced in order to have rights. Fundamentally, you're no different than Marxists.
Pretty much. Alright, so I'm going to play now.
They even
See, the number of people
themselves the
sleeping
same
rough
way.
has doubled in 5 years. And unfortunately, at the moment, the only people trying to address it are the goddamn socialists. No one cares apart from the socialists. The problem with Marxists is they're the only people in bourgeois societies who actually care about the poor. They're the only people actually trying to talk to them.
I wonder why the left seems to be, on the whole, largely committed to these causes.
Imagine
It's
believing in
something
the
that you
political
find scantily
spectrum.
addressed by the middle to right sphere.
Magically thinking that libertarians aren't talking about
Cal
the
may
poor.
find himself wondering why it is that these ideologies can barely create a solid solidarity towards these topics. You may be a liberal and say, yeah, I support that too.
And I'm saying this as someone who always gives money to homeless people. I am very sympathetic to the plight of people on the streets.
But the effects and actions are what counts. Fact of the matter is, there's no confidence here. I see no outpouring of condemnation coming from you when politicians like Bolsonaro press forward their restrictive measures, unlike what you had to say for this powerless redhead. Why is that? Count Dankula, otherwise known as Mark, who interestingly I had a couple of scuffles with a while back without realizing it, taught his dog to do the Hitler salute, and he got fined £800. Now, that's probably one of the most petty excuses for a sentencing, I'll admit, but again, this is not about whether or not it's justified, it's about people's standards.
Yes,
During
it
and after
fucking
the
is!
sentencing, Mark received...
That's literally what this fucking video is about.
It's about forcing his standards on other people.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it. Look at the title of the video: "The Problem with Freedom of Speech."
I mean, the problem with positivism is that every individual is going to have their own specific ideas of what rights they think they should be entitled to. So it's only going to dissolve into, for lack of a better term, chaos, with everybody fighting each other over the right to decide which rights they get to extract from other people at gunpoint.
Also, let's not skip over the whole the point that he was showcasing that Sargon was talking about earlier. Socialists are not the only people that are talking about improving living conditions. Libertarians are too. It's just that, socialists They don't really have a solid idea for how to achieve that.
They think they
Well,
do, but it's just
they
like
they think they do. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it. They think they do, but it's they completely reject all of the valid criticisms of their ideas. So it's basically what they like is to demagogue to the people who are of lower incomes assigned by the government. Notice that what's considered poor is completely arbitrary.
pretty much. And I'm reminded of Thomas Sowell, the black economist or the black Austrian economist. He says that he used to be a Marxist when he was younger, but he became more sympathetic to capitalism when he started to actually look at the data and pointed out that it's like, hey, our ideas, I mean, they aren't being fully implemented, but where they are, it's not only not helping the poor, but it's actually making things worse. And of course, with the group he was originally working with, like when he presented this data to them, pointing out like, hey, our ideas aren't working. Maybe we should actually try helping the poor in a different way. He was largely ridiculed. So people who otherwise want to help the poor out of the goodness of their hearts or like just general sympathy, they aren't socialists for very long if they genuinely believe that. They're either delude themselves, are otherwise indoctrinated, or something else happens.
They're usually emotionally invested. That's mainly the problem with these people who are like super into it.
I think that's why I specified indoctrination a little bit earlier, because the way indoctrination works is that you get people to have a Pavlovian emotional reflex that provokes anxiety whenever they're faced with criticism or faced with anything that's not Marxist orthodoxy, which is obviously why they get so hysterical all the time. They're trying to postpone that anxiety, and anyone who disagrees with them is inflicting that anxiety upon them. Well, at least that's what their perception is. But start the video?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Enormous support from, well, everyone. And now he's more famous than he ever previously was. Enough to be at the forefront of the Free Speech Festival later that year, and even use his fame to help push forward the re-emergence of UKIP. This is attention that people would pay top dollar for. Way more than 800 quid. If I was him, I'd be proud that I got that court hearing. Not disappointed. Frankly, me and my colleagues who I was with at the time didn't really care about this whole thing that much. What happened around the same time that did catch some of our attention, however, was the plight of the J20 protesters who got arrested back during Trump's inauguration. Some of these people are currently on the butcher's list to serve 60-year sentences for standing against a president who's, well, a dick. I mean, yes, I know the liberal opposition is fucking corny as hell, but he's still a dick. They've all been dicks. He's just continuing the line that every dick who ever stood on center stage ever started. This is America. What, you think Bernie's gonna save you? You think that reforming the Democrats is ever gonna change the nature of the number one imperialist power? Apologies. If you are at all concerned...
No wonder he had to stop himself. He almost came to the conclusion that they're all lying sociopaths. You have to stop yourself from taking ideas to a logical conclusion, don't you?
Yeah. Also, is no one going to acknowledge that he's defending? He's actually unironically defending Antifa, and he's coyly dismissing them as protesters.
Well, no. Anyone who's seen the video of the protests after Trump's inauguration and after Trump's electoral victory. Well, I mean, first off, the day of Trump's electoral victory, I don't think I've ever had a happier day in my life, just because of the the bountiful harvest of salt.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of Trump, and I've made an entire video explaining the problem with punitive justice. I don't even think people should be that jail is consistent with a free society, but Yeah, these people weren't just like shouting; they were destroying millions of dollars worth of property. At least somebody's life was probably destroyed because of that.
I mean, if they were just chanting, holding signs, and marching down the streets, who cares? If they were, but they're destroying property. I mean,
Yeah,
come
they were
on, this
setting
isn't.
cars on fire.
And what was it in Berkeley?
They
We have a
they beat
the pre.
yeah they beat the shit out of people too. It wasn't just that they were breaking millions of dollars worth of property. They also beat the crap out of people.
Yeah, and what was it in Berkeley? The Antifa professor hit the guy with a bike lock.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if this is only the stuff we know about, and there's not a lot more that's either being suppressed or we just haven't found it yet. It's just obscure. But
I think the
anyways,
worst part about the sorry,
you were gonna
I
say
think the
something?
worst part about the yeah, I think the worst part about the Antifa protests is that some people believe that they represent anarchists.
and that's the point. Filthy and I have both done some extensive research, and James Corbett's also made a pretty long podcast about this. Um, Even like Antifa for the longest time, like the ones that are actually genuinely driven, like they think they're anarchists, have been speaking out for a while about government agents infiltrating the black blocs, and yeah, Filthy and I have been calling out like a lot of these protests. There's a direct paper trail between like the J20 summit in not the J20, but the one in Germany. That
That's
one was
G20.
in G20, and yeah, there was one in Ontario which was funded by their government, and the mayor of Berkeley uh, issued a direct order for the police to stand down and basically just let Antifa destroy the city.
And in Charlottesville, there was not only a stand down order, but the police were instructed specifically to hem the alt right and Antifa together. So
Yeah, and
they are
and
directly
that's
causing
another
these
thing.
things.
That's another thing. It's not one sided either. The Patriots prayer, like clash between Antifa and them that happened in Portland, Oregon. I mean, it came out a few months ago that the chief of police and one of the major organizers for the Patriot Prayer were talking and like collaborating through emails. So both of these, the groups which are engaging in violence, it's manufactured by the government.
Pretty much.
That's not the least bit surprising,
That I
especially
didn't really give
considering
much of a
the
toss about
revolution
Mark's
and how
pub
few
joke.
people showed up.
Don't worry. If you have ever had friends like him, like I have in the past, you'd know that this stuff isn't too surprising. I know that these are highly political times, but a guy who votes UKIP is not particularly my number one concern right now. Now, I didn't happen to give a toss, but I sure as hell know somebody who did. Mike Stepbury, who you remember from his childish Twitter ramblings and dealings with Watson. He proclaimed that the left needs to stand with free speech, a free speech which is largely at the teat of right-leaning discourse. Carl, who was there with him, earlier that year got deplatformed by
Absolute
lefty rebels in
fucking
his
cancer.
debate with Mew.
I love
He's
how
on a
Sargon seems to be the big representation, the avatar of free speech in this case.
and I love how he says freedom of speech. It's a right wing idea. Okay, well, I mean, aside from the problems with the left right dichotomy, I mean, you wonder why it's such a partisan issue when you say things like that, implying that there's an entire anyone who would consider themselves left is against the idea. It's an idea which is against that group of ideologies.
Well, I wonder if this is intentional, in the sense that he's deliberately trying to galvanize people towards a left and a right. If you're for free speech, then you're being put into this box, or I'm putting you into this box. If you want censorship or think that, yeah, free hate speech laws are a great idea, I'm
Of
putting you
course,
into
it's
this box.
intentional. Yeah, of course it's intentional. One of the fundamental root of Marxism is the Hegelian dialectic. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
There's not really any other reason for him to make this argument. I'm pretty sure that both have shown equally that they're only for free speech that they agree with.
oh yeah, you see the so-called right-leaning people online all the time talking about necessarily suppressing the rights of the left. It's fucking retarded. Rights are not a fucking political concept. They they don't apply to groups based on their politics. That would mean they aren't rights if that's the case. Everyone has rights, and this sort of political tribalism is simply a manufactured stunt to try and get people engaged in a sort of ideological jingoism, and to where they only look at their own in-group as being a good thing. And the states exploited this quite well, especially through nationalistic ideologies, because that gets people in a mentality to where they think that they need the state in order to have their interests met, which is so they tend to like vote and get more dependent on political services.
Sounds about right. Anyways, let's keep going.
The dogma is enforcing itself here. The left is supposed to throw up our hands and switch liqueur of which virtue and gender is the floor, and decide whether or not we should allow freedom of speech for our enemies or not allow it. When what we should be doing is taking control of the narrative, putting forward our views as the new talking point of discussion instead of a fucking Nazi pug.
Hey, what gives you the right to control the narrative?
That's a good question. Hegemonic propaganda of our status quo is already enforcing the narrative. Noam Chomsky. Yeah. Thought as much. I need to find a way to make this more interesting.
Well, that's actually a very hold on. You,
Yeah.
that's actually
Oh
a
God. Give me a minute here.
yeah.
It's time.
Okay, yeah.
Is
Okay,
there any
this,
freeze frames is there any freeze frame where he's not staring into my soul?
Theory.
Alright, there we
he's a
go.
fucking
Also really slow at getting to the point.
okay. This one's not much better, but at least he's not staring at the camera like that. But anyway, yeah, that's not a terribly bad point, but again, that's a materialistic analysis, and it's something which necessarily exists as a result of state coercion. I think one of the main things Filthy and I have been pointing out throughout the last few months is how the state monopolizes the narratives through programs like Operation Mockingbird and through media licenses and COINTELPRO and all sorts of the legal process like that. Noam Chomsky would argue that it's because there's a bottleneck of information, and that's the reason why the narratives are similar. Like there's only a handful of different companies. That does not explain why the talking points are exactly the same, and why there are only a few things which are being discussed.
There are an infinite number of ways to interpret anything. The reason that all the media personalities sound exactly the same, it cannot possibly be explained as a bottleneck, as you said. Like, I'm sure everyone here has seen that video of like the montage of 56 news channels in the United States, like all saying the same thing. It's a direct threat to our democracy.
Well, there is a bottleneck of information. It just doesn't exist naturally as a result of media being privately managed. In fact, the reason why there's only a handful of media companies is because of the government's meddling in the market.
They own the airwaves and they hand out licenses for their use. So, in other words, they have.
Yeah, if you don't have a license, you can't have a media outlet over the airwaves. In other words, they have a de facto monopoly on who can be a publisher on the traditional television and radio stations.
And it's also why they have control. Well, that's also why they've been seeking control over Facebook, YouTube, and Google because uh, I said YouTube. I meant Twitter and Google, and just generally the big tech companies. Because as soon as the internet run around, suddenly that there was a way you could go around the traditional media systems, and people could talk among each other. You could receive news source. There's suddenly an infinite number of other news sources that you could get besides the mainstream media. And now we have them trying to get control of it through monopolizing big tech and creating all these other digital false flags of Facebook cut Facebook censoring people. Therefore, we need government to control Facebook, even though Facebook only censored because the government told them to do so in the first place.
Well, the other problem with Chomsky's argument is that it assumes that the profit for each corporation would be exactly the same, like what they would have to do to gain profit. Everyone who's watching the media is the exact same demographic. That doesn't make any sense. There are different demographics of people, and they necessarily conflict with one another. You can't you can't both appeal to people who would be like in the Nickelodeon age and people watching fucking that one station which airs like 50s movies all the time. Those are two completely different demographics. So,
And what's the average age for the Fox viewer?
well, based on the amount of dialysis commercials and prescription lens commercials, I'd say they're 60s, 70s,
It's gonna
that
be the same.
range.
It's gonna be the same thing with all major media. Their their audience is literally dying.
Yeah, everyone's going to the internet. Well, that's because there's more variety on the internet.
Yeah. But anyways, we're just about over. We're just about to our hour, so we kind of have to wrap this up, which is unfortunate because we're barely even one third of the way into the video. Suffice to
Next
say,
time we watch one of. Sorry,
What?
go ahead. I was gonna say next time we watch one of this guy's videos, we probably want to increase the play speed. He's slow.
probably. I mean, it I don't
It
know if
would
it's
be
just
hard.
because he has a lot to say or if it's just because he's dragged it out.
Because the problem with that though is that it would be hard to respond because he'd be saying so many things so quickly.
Oh yeah, true.
So it's hard
Yeah.
to think about it when you're constantly being overloaded with tons of concepts. In a way, it's good that he presents his arguments like this, so that it's easier to respond to them and for people to process the information.
I mean, when I make videos, I want people to be able to hear it, to be able to understand it and comprehend it. Even if they can't recall all the information at the very end, be able to articulate it to other people, they should at least be able to get some ideas and talking points down.
Yeah, that's the reason I don't talk very quickly unless the context calls for it.
I have a tendency to talk fast. I've been trying to fix that. It's usually when I get into something, but anyways, yeah. That's just about wraps up this stream. So, anyone wants to shill something, do so now.
I'm Esoteric the Free. I've got some major announcements which are coming out in the near future. I've also I'm also starting to do Q&A streams at the end of the month, and the Q&A stream for this month is going to be on the 30th. So be sure to be watching on my channel for that. I'm probably just going to be I'm going to be interacting with the chat and playing RuneScape or something like that.
All right. Pumpkin?
I highly recommend not relying on the Republicans to defend your freedom of speech. They're not going to do jack shit about it.
I mean, I wouldn't just not recommend it. I would staunchly demand that they refuse to do so. I mean, I wouldn't even want them to defend my rights anyway because they suck at it. What rights have they defend? What rights have they defended in the last 100 years?
Well, big surprise, when you use coercion to achieve something, you receive authoritarian ends.
Exactly.
Weird how that works. Yeah. Anyways, this video I'm working on has been a little hard to make, both because it's a topic I don't usually talk about, and because, well, I've been playing a lot of Warframe recently. So, but anyways, yeah, that should be coming out hopefully in the next 2 days. Anyways, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you on Friday.